Joseph Alexander Mabry II was born near present-day Concord in West Knox County, Tennessee, to state legislator and farmer Joseph Alexander Mabry and Alice Hare Scott. In 1837, his father was killed in a duel in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, leaving Mabry to be raised by his older brother, George, who later built the Mabry Hood House. After completing his schooling in Knox County, Mabry likely attended the Holston Seminary in New Market and possibly Tusculum College, though the latter has no official record of his enrollment. In the early 1850s, Joseph Mabry formed a land-holding company that speculated on land around Knoxville. In 1853, he and his brother-in-law, attorney William G. Swan, donated the land for what is now Market Square, then just pasture land north of the city limits, so the city could establish a market house for local farmers to sell their produce. Around the same time, Mabry leveraged his influence in the Tennessee state legislature to secure funding for railroad construction, eventually obtaining millions of dollars in bonds for the Knoxville and Kentucky Railroad. By the time the railroad went into receivership in 1869, the state had loaned it over $2.3 million. Mabry was appointed president of the railroad in 1858 and had begun construction of the first section to Clinton, though the Civil War interrupted progress. Mabry also raised prized race horses, which competed in races throughout the South, and in 1860 he listed his occupation as stock raiser. In 1858, he built the Mabry Hazen House on a hill in East Knoxville, where he lived for the rest of his life. Additionally, Mabry served as a trustee for East Tennessee University, now known as the University of Tennessee. By the early 1860s, Joseph Mabry had become one of Knoxville's largest slaveholders and, like many Democrats, generally supported secession. During the succession crisis following Abraham Lincoln's election in November of 1860, Mabry vacillated between forcefully advocating for immediate succession and seeking a peaceful resolution. In April of 1861, he famously chased away a Confederate brass band that was trying to disrupt a speech by pro-Unionist Andrew Johnson. However, the following day, when Union supporter Charles Douglas was shot by a Confederate soldier on Gay Street, Mabry was later charged as an accessory to the incident. In December of 1861, after pro-Union editor William Brownlow of the Knoxville Whig was jailed for treason by Confederate authorities, Mabry, unlike many other secessionists, lobbied for Brownlow's release and succeeded. This act of mercy was never forgotten by Brownlow, who later spared Mabry from the harsh treatment that many ex-Confederates faced during Reconstruction. During the Civil War, Mabry established a supply depot that provided uniforms and tents to Confederate soldiers, and he claimed to have donated $100,000 to the Confederate cause. However, historians note that Mabry may have earned as much as $1 million through contracts with Confederate purchasing agents. When the Union Army occupied Knoxville in September of 1863, Mabry quickly shifted his allegiance and offered his assistance to the occupying forces, taking the United States oath of allegiance on January 29, 1864. After the Civil War, Joseph Mabry continued his efforts to promote railroad construction. Collaborating with fellow Confederate-turned-Unionist Charles McClung McGee, Mabry played a key role in extending the Knoxville and Kentucky Railroad to what is now Caryville, granting crucial railroad access to the coal-rich areas of western Anderson County. However, by 1869, the railroad had gone bankrupt and was placed in receivership, marking the beginning of Mabry's financial decline, as he fell deeply into debt. During the 1860s, Mabry frequently clashed with Knoxville attorney John Baxter, who accused him of profiteering and opportunism during the war. When the Knoxville and Kentucky Railroad went into receivership in 1869, Baxter sued Mabry, alleging that he had effectively plundered the company. Their animosity spilled into the press, with both men filing libel suits against each other. The feud escalated on June 13, 1870, when Mabry confronted Baxter outside the Lamar Hotel, declared "business is business," and shot Baxter in the wrist. Baxter managed to escape and, for unknown reasons, never pursued legal actions against Mabry. In December of 1881, Joseph Mabry's son, Will, was shot and killed by Constable Don Lusby during a barroom brawl at Snodderly's Brawl on Gay Street. Lusby was arrested and charged with murder, but he was acquitted in April of 1882, leaving the Mabry family furious. In the following weeks, tension between Mabry and Lusby escalated as they exchanged threats. In August of 1882, a violent brawl broke out at the Knoxville County Courthouse involving Mabry, his son, Joseph Mabry III, Lusby, Lusby's father, and others. During the chaos, Lusby and his father were both shot and killed. Mabry and his son were charged with their murders, but were later acquitted. In 1880, Mabry had sold a piece of land to Thomas O'Connor, president of Mechanics National Bank, under the condition that O'Connor would transfer the land to Mabry's son, Will. After Will's death, the land reverted to O'Connor, leading Mabry to suspect that O'Connor had orchestrated Will's murder. On October 17, 1882, a drunken Mabry confronted O'Connor at the fairgrounds in South Knoxville, but O'Connor diffused the situation, stating it wasn't the appropriate time or place to settle their dispute. That evening, Mabry sent a message to O'Connor declaring he would kill him on sight. On the morning of October 19, 1882, O'Connor stepped outside Mechanics Bank and saw Mabry walking down Gay Street. Grabbing a double-barreled shotgun, O'Connor fired both barrels, instantly killing Mabry. Hearing the gunfire, Joseph Mabry III rushed to the scene, and upon seeing his father's body, he drew his pistol and shot O'Connor. As O'Connor fell, mortally wounded, he managed to fire one last shot, killing the younger Mabry. In the crossfire, 7 bystanders were also injured by stray bullets from O'Connor's gun. Joseph Mabry and his son, Joseph Mabry III, marking the 3rd consecutive generation of the family to die in a gunfight, were laid to rest beside Will Mabry in Old Gray Cemetery after a funeral at the Mabry Hazen House on October 20, 1882. Thomas O'Connor was buried in the same cemetery the following day. Robert Ford was born in 1862 in Ray County, Missouri, the youngest of 7 children to James Thomas and Mary Bruin Ford. As a young man, he grew to admire Jesse James for his exploits during the Civil War and his notorious criminal activities. At the age of 18 in 1880, Ford had the opportunity to meet his idol. It is believed that Ford's brother, Charlie, participated in the Blue Cut train robbery with the James Younger Gang on September 7, 1881, in Jackson County, near Glendale, Missouri. In November of 1881, following the train robbery, Jesse James relocated his family to St. Joseph, Missouri, intending to leave his life of crime behind. By this time, the James gang had dwindled significantly. Several members had fled to avoid prosecution, and many of the original members were either dead or imprisoned after a failed bank robbery in Northfield, Minnesota. Jesse's brother, Frank James, also decided to retire from crime after the train robbery. He moved east and settled in Lynchburg, Virginia. By the spring of 1882, with his gang severely diminished by arrests, deaths, and defections, Jesse James believed he could only trust the Ford brothers, Charlie and Robert. Charlie had previously participated in raids with James, while Robert was a keen new recruit. The Ford brothers lived with the James family in St. Joseph, where Jesse was using the alias Thomas Howard. In an attempt to revive the gang, James invited the Fords to join him in robbing the Platte City Bank in Missouri. However, the Ford brothers had already decided against participating. Instead, they planned to claim the $10,000 bounty placed on James by Governor Thomas T. Crittenden. In January of 1882, Robert Ford and fellow gang member Dick Little surrendered to Sheriff James Timberlake at the home of their sister, Martha Bolton, in Ray County. They were brought before Crittenden, as they had been in the company of Jesse James's cousin, Wood Height, on the day Height was killed. Crittenden promised Ford a full pardon if he would kill James, who had by then become the most wanted criminal in the United States. Determined to capture the James brothers, Crittenden made this his top priority, even stating in his inaugural address that no political motives would prevent them from being brought to justice. Although the law restricted him from offering a substantial reward, Crittenden secured a $5,000 bounty for the capture of each brother, with an additional $5,000 for the conviction of either. While living with the James family, the Fords became part of their daily routine, with Jesse's wife even cooking for them. Despite this, the brothers grew increasingly anxious and restless, seeking the right moment to act. As news of Little's confession to his role in Height's murder spread, pressure began to mount around Jesse James. On April 3, 1882, after breakfast, Jesse James, along with the Ford brothers, entered the living room before they were to head to Platte City. While reading the daily newspaper, James discovered that gang member Dick Little had confessed to his involvement in Wood Height's murder. This revelation made James increasingly suspicious of the Fords, as they had never informed him of Little's confession. According to Robert Ford, it became apparent that James had realized their true intentions to betray him. However, instead of confronting them, James walked across the room and placed his revolvers on a sofa. Noticing a dusty picture above the mantel, he stood on a chair to clean it. At that moment, Robert Ford drew his weapon and shot James in the back of the head. After the killing, the Ford brothers contacted Governor Krystlynn to claim their reward. They turned themselves into the authorities, only to be shocked when they were charged with first-degree murder. On the same day, they were indicted, pleaded guilty, and sentenced to death by hanging. However, just 2 hours later, Crittenden granted them a full pardon. Public opinion quickly turned against the Ford brothers after they betrayed their gang leader, with Robert Ford in particular being labeled a coward and a traitor for killing Jesse James. This sentiment conflicted with the general belief at the time of James's death that it was necessary to stop him by any means. Despite the backlash, Robert capitalized on his notoriety by earning money posing for photographs as the man who killed Jesse James in dime museums. He also toured with his brother Charlie, reenacting the murder in a stage show. Charlie, suffering from terminal tuberculosis and addicted to morphine, died by suicide on May 4, 1884. Shortly after, Robert Ford and Dick Little moved to Las Vegas, New Mexico, where they opened a saloon. On December 26, 1889, Ford survived an assassination attempt in Kansas City, Kansas, when an attacker tried to slit his throat. Within a few years, Ford settled in Colorado, where he opened a saloon and gambling house in Walsenburg. After silver was discovered in Creede, Ford closed his Walsenburg saloon and opened a new one in Creede. He purchased a lot and, on May 29, 1892, opened Ford's Exchange, which was reportedly a dance hall. However, just 6 days later, a major fire destroyed the entire business district, including Ford's Exchange. Undeterred, Ford set up a temporary tent saloon while he made plans to rebuild his establishment. 3 days after the fire, on June 8, 1892, Edward O'Kelly entered Robert Ford's tent saloon armed with a shotgun. According to witnesses, Ford had his back turned when O'Kelly called out, "Hello, Bob." As Ford turned to see who it was, O'Kelly fired both barrels, killing him instantly. O'Kelly became known as the man who killed Jesse James, but he never revealed his motive for the murder. O'Kelly's sentence was later commuted due to a medical condition and a petition with 7,000 signatures supporting his release. He was freed on October 3, 1902. However, O'Kelly met his end on January 13, 1904, when he was killed while attempting to shoot a policeman. Robert Ford was originally buried in Creede, but his remains were later moved and reinterred at Richmond Cemetery in his hometown of Richmond, Ray County, Missouri. His grave marker bears the inscription, "The man who shot Jesse James." Joseph Quinn, despite being rumored as a pimp and a rival thug in the 5 Points, was portrayed quite differently in newspaper accounts, which described him as a respectable young man who had worked at a cotton exchange for the past 9 years. A notable local athlete, Quinn was an accomplished amateur wrestler, competing with the Pastime and New York athletic clubs. His achievements included winning the spring competition of the New York Athletic Club and claiming the state championship in the middleweight catch-as-catch-can wrestling category. On April 9, 1885, he participated in the inaugural exhibition of the Crib Club, which he faced fellow Pastime Club member John O'Brien in a catch wrestling match, with both securing 1 fall each. Later that year, on December 10, 1885, Quinn and O'Brien met again at a New York Athletic Club exhibition. In this rematch, each wrestler gained a pinfall, but after wrestling for an additional 10 minutes for a deciding 3rd fall, the match was declared a draw. Though Lyons and Quinn had no prior connection, both men had recently been romantically involved with the same local woman, Kitty McGowan. Lyons, who had been released from Sing Sing prison just 7 months earlier on burglary charges, confronted Quinn on the corner of 38th Street and 2nd Avenue on the night of July 2, 1887. While Quinn initially refused to engage, the argument escalated and he struck Lyons, leaving him with a cut above his left eye. Following the altercation, Lyons vowed revenge, telling his friends in the neighborhood. He borrowed a revolver from his friend Alexander Neal, planning to shoot Quinn on sight. Over the next 2 days, Lyons searched for Quinn, asking around but failing to find him. He eventually spent an afternoon waiting at a liquor store on 2nd Avenue. At around 5:30 p.m., Quinn arrived by streetcar and got off at the crossing of 38th Street and 2nd Avenue. Although Lyons was in clear view, Quinn apparently didn't notice him and continued toward his home. As Quinn neared a butcher shop near his tenement, Lyons ambushed him from across the street. Lyons shot Quinn in the abdomen, and bystanders carried him to a nearby drugstore where Dr. C.W. Pfeiffer attempted to treat him. Quinn was taken by ambulance to Bellevue Hospital but succumbed to internal bleedings an hour later. Lyons fled the scene quickly, but numerous eyewitnesses had identified him, giving the police a solid description. However, when officers first arrived, a bystander pointed out a man named Joseph Vince, who was then taken into custody. Vince, a German-born cigar maker, was later cleared of any involvement in the crime. Following Quinn's murder, a citywide manhunt for Lyons was launched by the New York police. Captain Ryan of the 21st Precinct assured the press, saying, "If we don't get him, Inspector Burns's men will get him wherever he goes." The inspector's officers have solved far more difficult cases than this. Dr. Pfeiffer had initially judged Quinn's wounds to be fatal. Bellevue Hospital faced criticism for delays in dispatching an ambulance. Hospital records show they were not notified of the shooting until 6:10 p.m., more than half an hour after Quinn had been carried into the drugstore. It was only when a young man entered the hospital to inquire about the ambulance that one was finally sent. By 6:25 p.m., Quinn had been brought to the hospital, but he succumbed to his injuries. His death would eventually lead to improvements in the city's ambulance response system. Danny Lyons was executed in the Tombs prison in New York City on August 21, 1888.